end up seeing with this is GPs being asked to commission health services, realising there's no way that they could, as just one practice, do this. Thinking, okay, why don't we club together with some other GP practices, ending up forming very similar areas to the PCTs that have just been abolished, hiring back the SAC staff on higher agency and contract rates and private rates. So you end up in a situation where the structure looks identical to how it looks at the moment, but the costs have gone up. I don't understand the logic of these changes, and I think one of the really worrying things, you hear about all these rows inside government, Simon I'm sure will know more about this than we do, but it seems like Andrew Nancy is the only person in the country who actually believes in this policy. I also wanted quickly just to follow up on Sean's very important point about the Green Investment Bank. First of all, the gentleman who said that there was no difference between the parties going into the election. Douglas has talked about the difference in the speed you take to reduce the deficit. The slower you take it, the more growth can play a role in bringing down the deficit, particularly if you have pro-growth policies, which I'll come on to. There were also decisions that the coalition took to cut taxes. This was not the time for a tax cut. The tax cut was the same as more spending. The coalition was convinced that Labour had overspent, even though there was very little evidence for that, but instead announced a series of tax cuts to council tax, to corporation tax, to income tax, which Simon reduces. It was the wrong time for that strategy, and it put more pressure on the welfare budget and the departmental budgets. We should actually have done a little bit more in terms of taxing the banks. I don't think that the rhetoric of bashing the bankers is always the right one, but there was certainly more that could have been done, combining the banking levy which the coalition brought in with the bankers' bonus tax, and indeed a more generous banking levy. That would also reduce pressure. The final thing, we have a slightly technical but very important thing in this country, which is that we lump capital investment into what's called public spending borrowing requirements. That's something that isn't done by the Maastricht Treaty requirements that most countries in Europe do. And what it means is that important capital investment gets put in borrowing figures. One of the things that we could do at the moment, given that the cost of borrowing for the public sector is much lower than the cost of borrowing in the private sector, is to have a much larger investment bank than the coalition is proposing. They're proposing 1 billion. We should do very much more than that to do not just renewable energy, but also toll roads, railroads, and so on. And this is a really important way of getting the economy moving, of putting investment in place that we need to bring down the carbon intensity of the economy, and also creating jobs. And I don't think the coalition quite grasped this, but I hope that in the way that Sean describes the London Assembly, Labour, Lib Dem, Greens, and the Conservatives, if they're willing to do this, can come together and create quite a radical change in how we deal with capital investment in the UK for the good of our economy and the good of our carbon future.
Thank you.